Good morning, everybody. As you join us, we're just going to give people a couple of minutes to get into the room. But if you can see myself and Brendan on screen and you can hear me okay, just pop something in the chat. Tell us where you are this somewhat bright Tuesday morning. We'll just give people a minute to come on into the room. But thank you for joining us. So nobody's put anything in the chat yet, whether that's just they haven't got around to it or whether you can't hear me. Hopefully it's the former, but if you can hear me, if somebody can say hello to us in the chat box, that would be marvellous. Excellent. Thank you. They're pouring in now. Slight delay. So thank you, everybody, for those comments. I hope everybody's well. We will get cracking. So let me just share my screen to get us moving this morning. So thank you for joining us for our App Advisory Plus App of the Month webinar with AutoEntry. Whilst we have Brendan from AutoEntry here with us this morning, we're going to talk about a fairly new product called AccountsPrep. But first of all, introductions. Those of you that don't know me, my name is Will Farnell. I'm founder of Farnell Clark, an accountancy firm in Norwich, but also co-founder of App Advisory Plus. And I'm very delighted that I'm joined this morning by Brendan Woods from AutoEntry. Brendan, do you want to give a brief introduction to who you are, first of all?
Hi guys, and thanks Will for the invite. So Brendan Woods, as I've been introduced, but I was the founder of AutoEntry, where we built a company to automate data entry for accountants.
Excellent, thank you, Brendan. And we'll talk a bit about AutoEntry and your backstory there in just a moment. But purpose of this session, I'm really excited that we're talking to Brendan about this because certainly one of the challenges that I see in my firm and firms that I talk to is around sole traders and how do we encourage sole traders. There's a lot of them, 5.9 million small businesses in the UK, about 1.3 million of them are VAT registered, which means the rest aren't, and a large proportion of those are sole traders, small partnerships, and we've got this real challenge of how do we get them using tools and technology that's going to help them run better businesses and at the same time help us deliver better workflows within our accounting firm. So we're going to talk about some of those challenges. Why is it a challenge? Why I think and why Brendan certainly thinks that as accountants, we need a solution that's going to support us in this part of our client base. We're going to talk about how AccountsPrep offers a cost-effective solution for us here. Brendan's going to give us an overview of how it works, and then we're going to wrap up hopefully with some questions, because I'm sure there'll be people that have them when they've seen what Brendan's going to demonstrate for us, and then we'll touch on next steps if you want to get started and have a play around with AccountsPrep with some of your own clients in what is a very busy time of the year for us all. So Brendan, you've introduced you as Brendan. You guys have been around the ecosystem longer than most. I remember talking to you very early on at an Accountex event when it was Statement Rec and OcRecs and various other things. So just for people that don't know, just give us the kind of the AutoEntry story, where you came from and how we've got to AccountsPrep.
Yeah, so not to waste the whole webinar on this, but to try and summarize it up quickly, I suppose my background was that I was a software developer. I worked in financial services and I ran a team of software developers for the generation of reports for hedge funds. And in that role, I obviously worked with lots of accountants, be they working in financial reporting or fund accounting. And I, learned of what it was to work in the practice from some of those colleagues of mine at the time. And I remember one in particular colleague, making coffee in the canteen in the morning, and I asked him why he moved to financial services. And he said, well, working in practice was kind of boring. And I was really surprised because I'd be very entrepreneurial, and I thought, oh geez, I thought would be really fun to work in a practice and really be able to see under the hood of all of these different businesses, see what makes them tick or not tick, as the case may be. And he said, "No, sure, spend half my time typing up bank statements." And I laughed at him, assuming it was sarcasm, joking, exaggeration. But he totally poker faced me and said, "No, it's a lot of what I do, because we do a huge amount of once-a-year tax returns, which essentially primarily is underpinned by a bank rec. And to do that, we work back from the statements. And in a lot of practices, we don't necessarily either have the juniors to do that work for us, or we don't necessarily want to give it to them because we want to own it, right? Because doing the bank rec is getting your head into the business for that job. So I was shocked, and I thought there must be a better way to do this. So I started by doing a proof of concept of using some OCR software to capture bank statements, and that progressed. And eventually, I quit my job, started the company. We had our first product in 2012, which was AutoEntry, and that was for automating bank recs. That was the whole point for this exact job, and it was for taking a year's worth of bank statements, digitizing them accurately, quickly, and then being able to fast code them to a chart of accounts that would align with whatever accounts production software you would use. So you could choose chart of accounts for, say, sales accounts production or IOS or seasonal, whatever it is that you use, and get to a simple trial balance quickly, because that is the heart of this job. The heart of this job is saying, look, we've got a year's worth of transactions. It's a low price point piece of work, and our clients don't tend to have associate a lot of value to it, other than the fact that they're going to tick a box to say they're now compliant and don't do tax return.
Yeah.
And so for accountants, it was very difficult to make this work, particularly even as the firms got bigger. Although they might have juniors in the practice and things like that, they actually probably have greater overhead. So to some extent, every practice was impacted, and it was always a bit of a race to the bottom in terms of how cheap are you going to do my tax return?
Yeah.
Because I don't really appreciate the value. And so we figured that this was a great way to provide a solution to accounting firms to do that job much more effectively or efficiently, so that they can get their margin back, but also give them the time back. Because ultimately, the real opportunity I find at this time of year for accountants, although it's not always leveraged by them, is they're getting the opportunity to talk to hundreds of clients potentially that you don't necessarily easily get, airtime with during the year. So when you are doing this, if you have the spare time, because you're not spending all the time typing up bank statements, to actually prepare the account, but also then just discuss it with them for 5 or 10 minutes, it makes all the difference. And as this industry starts moving towards it more still advisory than just compliance, that's all it is. Advisory is not that complicated. It's just talking to clients, and being able to see opportunities with which you can help them.
Yep, great. And Brendan, I know we picked up before the call that there's a slight interference on your line. A couple of people have just commented on it in chat. So if you can talk just a little bit louder, and then hopefully everybody will hear that. And apologies everybody for that kind of running water noise that we tried to solve before we went live. So you kind of talked around some of those challenges there already, Brendan, in terms of this idea that, I mean, take my practice for example. We've got 600 kind of business clients, and then we've got about 600 clients that we do tax returns for. Some of those are small sole traders, and the 600 business clients are limited company clients. And it's like kind of sit in isolation. They don't quite fit into our structure because they won't use the core GL products because they see a big price tag on it, and the cost of a fully fledged zero license, for example, over 12 months is probably the cost of some of these sole traders kind of tax return fee, 300 quid at the end of the year or whatever. So how do we go about kind of supporting those clients, make that transition into using cloud tools, almost so we can demonstrate the value that they bring to helping those clients better understand their businesses and so on? And I'm guessing that's kind of the stuff you hear from the firms that are using your tools and your products, and that's not us in isolation with this problem.
That is true. Essentially, the job at hand doesn't necessarily need a fully fledged sort of purchase and sales ledger in a lot of cases for a simple landlord account, set up accounts, or whatever the case may be. So what we decided to do is we were already doing the job of capturing bank statements, which was taking out a lot of the labor involved with the job. But the downstream steps then, in order to avoid putting a client onto a fully fledged package, as you mentioned, when realistically this is something you're going to do over the course of a couple of hours,
yeah,
and there may not be need for that ongoing software support.
Yeah.
So we said, well, okay, so can we do those downstream steps for them as well? I mean, we charge typically on the capture of data. So
yeah,
if we're actually extracting data from documents, that's what we charge, and it's based on how much you use it. But we said, this piece, the downstream piece, although it costs us a lot of money to build software, once it's built, our running costs are relatively low. And we thought, if we can just give them those extra downstream steps, it really provides a great solution for this job at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So I think that was one of the things we wanted to do, and I think we've done well. And the second thing is, what we found was a lot of accountants, their challenge or to some extent fear of this piece is that even when they've got the bank data, that they're relying on all of their staff to work consistently in tools like Excel, which may not provide those guide rails, and are more prone to people accidentally having the correct formula or whatever this may be. And it's hard to manage or to sort of govern over that. Whereas at least a dedicated tool provides those barriers.
Yeah, great. So do you want to dive in, Brendan, and give us the overview of kind of what the workflow is for accountants, because that's ultimately the big driver here is how do we get better workflows, how do we get more efficiency in what we're doing?
Sure. So I won't do the whole demo of AutoEntry, right? Because lots of people here may already know AutoEntry, but they just may not realize that there is this other module, AccountsPrep, which they can use. So all I'll say is that when you have your list of companies, if I go back here, so when you have your list of companies and you click integrate, you will be able to choose of all of the connections you may want to connect to. So for example, this one is connected to AccountsPrep, but equally, if it was a bookkeeping client and not a once-a-year client, you may integrate with a bookkeeping solution like Sage Accounting or Xero or QuickBooks or whatever the case may be. And in that case, you're typically capturing bills and receipts, credit notes, supplier statements, and all those good things on an ongoing basis. For the once-a-year though, you don't necessarily, as you said, need that type of fully fledged solution. So instead, in what you will see when you integrate a company that you've set up in AutoEntry, rather than integrating to say accounting, QuickBooks, Xero, you'll also see an option for AccountsPrep, and you just choose AccountsPrep. And the difference then is it knows that you're going to be using this general ledger-based solution for this type of job and not a fully fledged accounting product. And when you come into the company, whilst all the other document folders seem much the same as you would always see in AutoEntry, where you can capture your bills and receipts and bank statements and so on, one extra thing you'll see over here on the left is this button that says AccountsPrep. Okay. So the first thing is people will click upload on the bank statements. They'll upload the scanned paper bank statements that they got from the client, and that's it, they upload them. In doing so, in the bank statements folder, what you will see is that we have uploaded, say, one batch of bank statements. And after a couple of hours, you'll get an email to say, hey, those bank statements are captured now and they're ready to use. So essentially from scanned images like this with all the usual, punch holes and crease marks and pen marks and everything else, you just upload a year's worth. So if it's 60 pages to scan images, you upload them, you'll get an email shortly later saying, hey, they're ready to go. And what you've got here is the date description, debit credit balance, and check number. Now in the past, you could just export that to Excel, but again, you're relying then on all of your staff to work consistently and not make mistakes without those guardrails that with the breadth of flexibility that Excel is giving you.
Yeah.
So what we do instead then is we propose that you integrate the company to the AccountsPrep module, which doesn't cost any money, by the way. So you will pay the same for capturing the bank statements and exporting to Excel. So everything I'm about to show you is just downstream functionality that we've added just for the benefit of our customers. Okay. So if we click on AccountsPrep, you'll see that we now come into a new screen, which is a ledger tool. So it's like a cash book, back cash book essentially, right? And what you'll see here is in this case, we have a situation where this client, let's say, has already had 3 sets of accounts prepared for periods ending end of December 2015, 16, and 17. Okay. And all that we would do is we would click Start New Period, and it will create a new period and adopt the opening balances from the closing balances of the previous period and so forth. Okay. If it's a new client, this will be blank, of course, right? Because there won't have been any past data. And you can import balances from, let's say, an export to a CSV file from your accounts production software that you may have used that client last year. Or you can manually import opening balances or edit them and add them, type them yourself. So with this is just a snapshot. And ultimately, I just want to highlight, this is kind of where we end up at the end, and we're able to say, oh, okay, we've got a view of your business, even if it's a very simple business. And we'll be able to generate a report for you so that, I often say the issue I find, or I believe, is sometimes the case with this race to the bottom pricing for this type of work, is that the clients don't appreciate what you've done for them. All they know is that it's a Boolean true, false. Have they made me compliant? Have they not? What did that cost? Right? So, if you're going to do a body of work and if they're transaction heavy, as clients are becoming more and more transaction heavy because they tend to use cards for lots of smaller transactions that they wouldn't have had in the past, there's more transactions, more to analyze. And then at the end of the year, you do all of this work. And if you're doing it manually, without capture technology and things like that, you could be spending hours or days preparing bank recs to get to a trial balance. And then what? You send them an email saying, hey, John, listen, got that job done for you. You're all good. We've filed your accounts, and please see attached our invoice. Now, John receives that email. He's got the Boolean checkbox ticked to say, oh, I'm compliant, great. And then he looks at the invoice. Now, for John, how much value does he feel is created, or how much appreciation does he have for all the work you've done? Or how much does he just think, well, could I have got it cheaper from a different account? Okay. And this is the piece that I was trying to address. So I was trying to say, okay, if you could send them a report, and then you can say, hey, hey, John, all good. We sent in your accounts, and FYI, I've attached a little report, just an overview of the business as we can see it from the accounts. And perhaps if you have 10 minutes, maybe in 2 weeks' time, once I get through the business season, I'll catch up with you and walk you through and just a few things I want to highlight to you.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing, isn't it, Brenda? That so much of this is, so much of what we're seeing now is about how do we create better client experiences? How do we proactively create client touch points? And this is stuff that a lot of sole traders, I'm sure that there's many firms listening that on a really simple sole trader would probably not even prepare a set of accounts. They'd do an income and expenditure statement, they'd bung the figures into the tax return, and it's kind of job done. File the tax return, as you say, send the bill. But actually, this is starting to help people understand what's going on in their business, how they've done this year compared to last year, and it's creating that trigger point for conversation that's so important, isn't it?
Exactly, that trigger point I think is really important. And there might be very little to say, for simple businesses, but it might be something as simple as saying, well, look, you'll obviously see, and you'll probably be aware, your revenue's gone up a lot this year, so pat on the back, well done. But just to be cognizant, your margins are dropping, or whatever the case may be. And then you can have a conversation. And you might find then that some clients don't even need the conversation. It's very, very simple. But there's others that are going to be in the middle ground. And then there's others that you'll probably find, you know what, I should be probably encouraging this client to become a more full-time bookkeeping customer for us to provide both bookkeeping on an ongoing basis and maybe management accounting and quarterly basis, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's the transition, isn't it? Into the
transition, but you need that trigger. So you need something to show them and discuss with them to say, hey, these are things that we can enlighten you with, and we can explain to you why you probably should take that next step.
Yep, great. So how do we get to this point?
So This looks all very heavy duty, right, for a lot of the types of clients that accountants are probably thinking about in their head. But actually, the process is the same and it's just as quick. So essentially, what happens is we've set up this company. You've got your bank accounts. So within the bank accounts here, this is a demo account, obviously, and I've got, let's say, a current account and a deposit account and a credit card. Very typical. Now, obviously, you can create new accounts. If there was a new client, just create an account, give it a name, that kind of thing. And with that, if you were to go into one of the bank accounts, you would see a summary just of the receipts, payments, transfers in, transfers out, and the sort of the cash balance across the period, and whether or not it's currently reconciled or not. So if I go back slightly then, and I go back into the bank accounts, you'll see again, against this bank account, you've got code 200 lines of unposted data. So I've imported the bank statement data. Now you're saying, whoa, 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 where is this all come from? Well, actually, if you think about it, you just click add statement data, and we've already uploaded the bank statements, as I said earlier, to AutoEntry. And you can just say use AutoEntry statement capture, and you click continue, and it'll show you then what's the list of banks and say, well, which bank account do you want to import data into? You choose here, say, the current account, and then you can continue, and then it'll show you the list of batches of bank statements that you've got in your bank statement folder in AutoEntry.
Yeah.
And you can choose one, and then you can top and tail it. So the top and tailing is because when you scan paper bank statements, the statement might start on the 14th of December, and it might then go throughout the next year and into the 14th of January.
Yeah.
And you need to cut off the last 2 weeks of December and the first 2 weeks of January in the following period. Yep. So you just choose the start and stop data. Within that captured set of data you've got from the paper statements, what range of dates do you want transactions imported? So yeah. Choose your okay? And then you go on. So ultimately then what happens is when you go, once you've imported a batch, what you'll find is you'll find unposted statement data in the bank account. So you can see here 200 transactions of unposted statement data. So if I click on that, this is where we do our analysis. Okay, so you've now got essentially maybe a year's worth of transactions, and they're all in here as you'd expect, captured from the bank statements. But obviously to do this, sorry, I should say as well, I'm about to start coding, right? So I can code to a chart of accounts, and you say, well, where did that chart of accounts come from? Well, you can create your own, or you can choose from a template. So we will have a template for, whether it's limited partnership, sole trader, for the likes of Iris, CCH, and most of the common products that you may ultimately want to get this data into. Cool. And then you can tweak them if you want. So you can take a standard set and you can clone it, and then just add an extra account, normal accounts if you have specific accounts that you want for farmers or whatever the case may be. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so what we do here is we obviously can code it up one by one. You say, well, that's not terrible, that's fine, but it doesn't speed things up all that much, right? Yep. Over and above doing an Excel. That's fine. But what we're going to do here is we're going to click on details to sort it alphabetically. So they're all not in chronological order, but in order of their, I suppose, their description. So now what we can do is we can, like in Excel, hold the Shift key, select multiple transactions and code them to, I don't know, computer costs or something to that effect. And so what you're doing essentially is when you're doing an annual set of accounts, you're going to fly through this because you're going to have typically 12 transactions for all of the recurring bills, whether it's British Gas, Thames Water, Vodafone, whatever the case may be, and you're just going bang, 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 basically one allocation per creditor or debtor. And then just the one-off transactions at the end. So once we code up all the transactions, we can then post incrementally as we go through. So we don't have to do all of the job in one go, or we can just save them as draft. So it depends on how the practice wants to operate. You can save as draft if you want all of the transactions to be reviewed by maybe a partner or a senior member of the team later. Or if you're happy to let them kind of get posted, so to speak, you post as you go. Now, even with posting as you go, one of the things that we saw in practices was that where available, a practice would often get a junior member staff to do this type of bank work and do this analysis. But the problem is they often struggle sometimes with some of the transactions, not knowing where to allocate them to. And the problem is they're putting their hand up, they're calling over the partner, and they're interrupting senior members of the team every 10 minutes because they're like, oh, yeah, another one. What do I do with this one again? Yep. And it's very disruptive, especially when there's so much going on at that time of year. So what we would say is, okay, my recommendation would be that if there's a transaction that the team member using or doing the bank rec isn't familiar with or doesn't know what to do with, they can flag it. So they just click on the flag. They still allocate it and choose a nominal code, but they flag it. And that means that later on, they'll call the partner once, and the partner will review all the flag transactions and sign off. Okay? So basically, the allocation or to the general ledger is really quick. It's really, you fly through it. Now, few of the things that are in this that are quite neat are things like being able to identify inter-account transfers. So if, for example, there was a payment from the current account just to pay off the credit card, well, you're not going to allocate it to anything. It's not purchases, transaction or anything else. So in that case, you can click transfer. You can choose to what other bank account it's going to transfer to, and it will auto match and things like that.
Yeah. And again, you can do that in block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing then is to split. So if there was a payment that you want to split into multiple nominal accounts. So a check was written, but some of it was for materials, some of it was for labor, and so on and so forth. You can click on the split, and you'll be able to add as many lines as you want. And as long as the different sum of its parts adds up to the total on the bank statement, it'll let you save and continue.
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect.
So now we've got a situation where we've got a year's worth of bank statements, has walked in the door in a Tesco bag, you put them on the scanner, you clicked upload to AutoEntry, and you walk away and you go back to some other work. 2 hours later, you get an email from AutoEntry saying, hey, your bank statements are ready. Fine. So I jump back into the account, import the data, top and tail it, sort alphabetically, and within 3 or 4 minutes, I've got a year's worth of bank statements digitized and then coded.
Yeah.
Okay. Next. Okay, so maybe there was a couple of cash receipts or cash, expenses, out-of-pocket stuff that wasn't visible on the bank statement. How am I going to account for that? Well, I'll go into accounting, and I'll go into, now I can actually import cash sales or cash expenses. So if, for example, your client was using, let's say it was a landlord and the client was using the AutoEntry app, they can take pictures of their B&Q receipts throughout the year, and then you can just import them and journal them. Okay. Yep. Alternatively, you can just go into the journals and you can create journals yourself. So if we go into the journal screen, you can just add a normal journal, double journal, or quick journal, right? So a normal journal, as you might expect, very simple. It's a batch entry screen, and you can fly in a bunch of bits of journal entries that you want. The one that I find a lot of people like is actually the quick journal. So if you have a lot of small things and you just want to put in the total, you can see here, and you can actually hack in an amount into any of the accounts.
Yep.
And assuming it all balances out, you're all good. It'll let you continue. Okay. So what have we got now? We've got a year's worth of bank statements captured, coded up, a few journal entries in, and all of which is done in literally 5 to 10 minutes of your time at the screen. Yep. You can also do the import checklists and things like that for for any carried forward checks that you reconcile with and things like that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finally, we've now got to the stage where the junior has said, right, I've imported my bank statement, I've coded them all up, be it a few of them are flagged because I'm not sure about them. I've got my journal entries in, and so on and so forth. And with them all coded up, what you would find, or they'll have done their checks and everything else, and where they want to get to is the place where this is all green, as in it's reconciled. So again, if I was to go into the bank account for this one here, it's saying it's not reconciled at the moment, but that's what they would work to. Yeah. Okay. Finally, then they're going to send an email to their manager, to their partner, or whatever the case may be, say, hey, Will, I think I've got that job done for John. If you want to take a look whenever you're ready. So next time you've got 5 minutes, you can jump in, and you can jump straight in, and there's a few nice simple reports where there's the P&L, which is all hyperlinked. So you can just dive straight through if you want to see what made up that 6,000 spent. Yeah. Similarly, you've got the balance sheet, same idea. And the account details, you want to see the whole lot, right? Just show me everything that's been coded up, and you will be able to see, sorry, I go into, a second.
The joys of live demos.
The joys of home internet, I think. To click happy, I think. Oh, here we are. So I'm in it. That's fine. Okay, so you can see here, I've got all of my different, and now of course I've clicked on a million other things, so I'll have to go back into it. So you've got your transactions, okay?
Yep.
So basically you can see these are all the transactions from different import batches of bank data, and all of the ways in which that generator has coded up the transactions, okay? And you'll see here some of them are flagged. So if you're saying, okay, look, I trust this guy that he would have flagged anything I need to check, you can just click on the flag transactions and click search. And it'll just filter out everything else, and just so that you're only reviewing those flag transactions. In which case, if this one here was the annual fee and they, you know, tagged it to whatever it was, and you're like, no, I'm not happy with that, actually, I'm glad he or she flagged it for me, you can click on the edit button, and very quickly then you will be able to essentially edit that. So you can say, actually, I don't want that to go to sales class 2, I want it to go to something else.
Yeah.
Okay. So we don't have to journal in, journal out, or anything like that. You'll also notice here analysis tags, a new feature we added recently. So analysis tagging is similar to, you know, cost center, department code, or tracking category, you know, in terms of how other products would refer to it. It's just a metadata tag that you can add. And that could be, for this type of job, as simple as saying, you know, you could have 2 tags, personal, business.
Yep.
As you know, so many people have transactions, you know, for landlords and so on, will use their personal bank accounts. Yep. And they don't necessarily have dedicated. So if you want to filter them out, you can just tag all of those that are personal as personal. Okay, and where we get to is a situation where we've got a bank rec, we've got our, here's where the bank statement's captured, uploaded, digitized, coded, journal entries put in, bank rec done, coded to a chart of accounts that reflects where I want this data to go. So how do I get it there? Last and not least, export the data. And you will then be able to choose, well, where do you want to export it for?
Yep.
And presumably you'd already have chosen your chart of accounts, so you could say, oh, I'm using whatever, certificate of production, for example, and depending on the product, it may give you a few options. So yep. I know, like, you know, some of them have lots of options, and you can choose all sorts of things.
Right.
That's how you import the data. And that's it. And then you click export, it'll give you the CSV file that then you can readily import into your account yep. software. So I don't know if you can see that there as well. Or are you still looking at my, are you looking at my Excel?
You just got your main presentation.
No, okay, well, I don't think I need to explain it anyway. It's very simple. You get your CSV file and you import it into your account product. So ultimately, what are we saying, if I recap over it, you get a year's worth of bank statements off your client, you scan it and upload it, that takes about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You walk away, you go back to work. You get an email sometime later saying, hey, that data is captured and ready for you to use. You go back in, you go into AccountsPrep, you import the data, sort it alphabetically, code it, put in any journal entries that are needed, import your checks, do your check rec, bank rec, and then once you're happy, you export and you're good to go. And then suddenly something that could take hours to days can be, in terms of actual time in front of the computer, can be less than 30 minutes.
Yes, brilliant. So, I mean, that's really helpful, Brendan. So thank you for taking us through that. I mean, it's certainly from where I'm sitting, what I see here is that in our firm, and I'm sure other firms are the same, they get these clients, they bring in data in a variety of formats. Normally with these sole trader type jobs, they're going to go into Excel. We're going to do a load of analysis in Excel. We're then going to probably key a TB into one of the products. So we kind of use different approaches, different formats and templates in terms of Excel. And what you're providing here is the ability to put some consistency around the process of these sole trader partnership type accounts. We've got the ability to output some nice reports, so you could in theory bypass your iris accounts production if you didn't want to go through that and send a P&L and a balance sheet from within AccountsPrep and just key the high level figures into personal tax, for example. Is that a fair summary of kind of what you've tried to do? You're on mute at the moment, Brendan.
Sorry, thank you. Absolutely, that's basically it. I won't dictate or suggest to people when they should or shouldn't use accounts production products. I'm not a chartered accountant. You're the guys who really know what you need and when. But for this early part of the job, to me, it seems straightforward that it was just a very labor-intensive job at low margin.
Yep.
And the client tended to have low appreciation.
Yep.
And I was saying, okay, so we've already solved for capturing bank statements. Now we can just put a few guide rails on the downstream steps of that, so that the juniors in the practice can be given the task to go and do it, and at the same time for the partners to feel assured that they're going to be able to review it quickly and efficiently, and then also generate something visual that they can give their client at the end to create a conversation.
Yeah, and of course the other thing I didn't mention in that is that, as we said, it's kind of, there's not an additional cost in terms of using AccountsPrep. It's if you're using AutoEntry, or you want to use AutoEntry for bank statements, receipts, and everything else, you pay for that bit, but the bit on top is no extra.
Exactly. This is very much a differentiator that we're finding of late. A lot of the bigger practices, as they become aware of it, they're saying, "Wow, this really differentiates AutoEntry." Because this is huge. Like, we have a huge volume of these clients, and it's something that would otherwise cost us money to use another product. And we're already using AutoEntry, maybe for capturing the bank statements, and to have this as a perk, it's a big perk.
Yeah, excellent. Let's take a look at some questions. Got some questions coming through. So first one, can it be used for credit card statements?
Absolutely, it can.
Yeah, great, excellent. It says you can upload CSV or manually add small amounts of data. Are these charged for as PDF data extraction?
No, they're not. So if you are, and this is something that for now we're letting it fly, basically saying, look, if you're getting the transactional data from your clients in CSV form, and you've got an AutoEntry account, you can import CSV files, which means that we're not charging you because you're not capturing them data from scanned images of bank statements, for example. And you can just use it essentially for free entirely. But we generally hope that at least you'll be contributing in the sense that you most likely will be using AutoEntry for those clients that you don't get CSV files from, and those clients that you use in a bookkeeping context for bills, receipts, and so on.
Yep, excellent. Questions from Adi here. So, question around VAT, and how do you tackle that, or is it a case of there's other products that are best suited for VAT registered businesses? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it is let's say it does have support for VAT as a VAT cash book, but it's straightforward. It's simple. Okay, so what we try not to do is try and build a product that's so complex that we have to do lots of maintenance every time there's a bit of a change to VAT rates or CIS or other things, because we're not trying to be that product. We're not trying to be a full-on bookkeeping solution. This is simply a tool for preparing accounts in arrears for these types of once a year clients. So yes, you can set up VAT codes and like a table of VAT codes. You can also set default VAT rates against nominal accounts. So for example, you could have sales class A, and you'd say, right, I want that to have a default VAT rate of 20%. And when you choose then sales class A for a given receipt of funds, it'll regross that and allocate the appropriate portion of that to you.
Right, excellent. And Adi, I think Brendan probably answered your other question there around export default chart of accounts going through to tax products. So hopefully that covered that question off. So just to kind of really wrap up in terms of some of the key takeaways and things here. Hopefully what's come across is that this is a pretty straightforward tool. It's clearly a cost-effective tool because you're not paying anything for the accounts prep bit at the end. You're paying for what you use with an auto entry. And yes, you can take CSVs and you can upload them, but actually a lot of clients are going to turn up with their bank statement. So auto entry has always been a cost-effective tool to kind of get that stuff scanned and into a format you can work with. I think it's so important that as accountants, we adopt consistent approaches in our internal workflows in terms of the way we manage the work that we do. This gives us some standardization. It gives us the ability to drive consistency across what we do within the kind of tax area of our practice, certainly. Brendan made the really important point that this is about stepping stones to wider cloud adoption. So many sole traders I know kind of resist changing what they do, particularly when there's costs associated with it. So what we need to look at here is what's the efficiencies that we're going to deliver by deploying these kind of tools and almost covering some of the costs ourselves in that, because we're going to be delivering the work more effectively, which increases our margin regardless of the costs that we're going to be picking up. And most importantly of all, people that have heard me talk on various topics will know how much I drive this kind of client experience piece. How do we create more regular, more frequent, more valuable client touch points in terms of proactive conversations with clients? And this provides us some really valuable output that we can share with clients, even if it is once a year. We're just doing it and we're starting to demonstrate that value. And the product's available to both existing auto entry users, as Brendan said, it's already in your product. And if you're not using auto entry and you think this tool has some value to you in your firm, then clearly it's available. And we're going to be sending out a follow-up email on this. We'll send you a recording of the session. There'll be a bunch of links in there. Rowan has put together an article on AccountsPrep talking about how it works, so we'll provide a link to that, and I think Brendan and his team are going to provide a couple of links if you want more information, if you want a demo or anything else, we can do that. And as an App Advisory Plus offer, you can get 50% discount for the first 3 months of your auto entry use. Brendan, anything to add to that kind of summary?
Well, that was a great summary, Will. Thank you very much. Yeah, and all of that is correct. The only thing I'd say is, look, existing customers, if you're seeing this for the first time, saying, how was that there and I didn't know about it? Apologies, we could have done a better job then in informing you. However, what you do know is that always within auto entry, you've got the little button down the bottom right hand side where you can chat to support, but simply put in a message and say, hey, I've just seen an overview of AccountsPrep and I'd like to get a chat to somebody who can show me a bit more detail, and we'll arrange for someone to do that for you. For people who maybe are new to auto entry, I would suggest that you engage with the follow-up from Will, and what we'll do is we'll arrange a one-to-one demo with you, because obviously there's the other side of the product which we haven't covered here today, and also just give you the opportunity to ask more detailed questions that maybe I glossed over or didn't go into the details of, when it comes to transfer accounts or tax or the VAT and things like that in more detail if you want to do so.
Excellent. Thank you, Brendan. There's been no other questions pop up in the Q&A box. If anybody has anything, do pop them in there as I kind of wrap up, and we'll answer those. But certainly the follow-up email will give you an opportunity to ping a message back to us or get in touch with the guys at AutoEntry. So all there is left to say is thank you all for joining us this morning. Hope it was useful. Brendan, pleasure having you on the webinar. Thank you for taking the time out.
No, my pleasure.
And I guess it's our last webinar of 2020, so it would be wrong for me not to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, and hopefully 2021 is going to be a slightly different year to what we've encountered in 2020. But thanks again for joining us. Hope it's been useful, and do reach out to the guys at AutoEntry if you want to know more. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks all. Thanks, Will.